Hello and welcome. Today our superpowers are kind of double header. Part of it is connection and the other part, dare I say, is responsibility. Connectedness is hugely important and often not understood. I think in an abstract sense, science still hasn't got there. We don't know how connected everything is. What we do know in practice, things like climate change, we know the whole of the climate is interrelated, connected. We know basically that nature and humans are connected. We are nature. So that's part of what happens and we need to be aware of it. The combo of connecting and responsibility, dare I say, in nature we call evolution. The thing about nature is it's a mix of turbulence and adaptation. Now, in terms of what we're doing at TLC, we just call that process creativity, but you can equally well call it evolution. One of the things about nature, which I think people confuse, there's the legend that it's about survival of the fittest. And in many respects, that is quite wrong. And I don't actually think it's what Darwin intended, but some of the people that were with him plugged it in as if it was a fact. What I prefer is thinking of nature as survival of the fittingest. And in fact, when you think about it, for the most part, when we walk around home, when we're just living our daily lives, you don't see too much of a battle of survival of the fittest. Everything actually gets on, everything is connected. The biggest thing that's happening is a sense of balance. Now, occasionally things get way out of balance, and part of what we're experiencing now is a leftover from the Industrial Revolution. Humans became very, very good at inventing things, and the balance has become out of whack. The creative response humans made at the time needs to be rebalanced. The other thing here is the effects of this rebalancing connect with the whole of nature, and as we go forward we have to think how do our responses affect the whole world long term. So it's not just a matter of making an adjustment. Some of the adjustments have actually made things worse. One of the things about this is you realise creativity is not a free ride. I get concerned sometimes when people bang on about the need for freedom. Our main freedom is actually the freedom to ask questions and to explore what happens after we've asked. That's not a freedom to do anything we like. It is not open slather at all. And I think all the time, connection, freedom, responsibility, they're all interlocked. They're like a weave. They're not like some single independent process at all. Now, some of the things about creativity which people may not pay a great deal of attention to, I think in the wider world, certainly within our solar system, it's clear that we're connected. When there are solar storms on the sun, they affect humans. They affect our communication. They probably affect our moods. They mess up the internet and so on. And it is possible that those connections go far more deeply into space. We may well be connected with the entire universe. Whether we can actually translate that into experience is a moot point, but the connection, I'm sure, goes a long way. At a closer level, some of our connectedness is surprising. I think, for example, simple things like whether animals know when their owner's coming home have to be checked out seriously. There is some evidence that in fact animals are connected in that way, or at least some of them are, and science is not really clear how that happens. There were experiments by Rupert Sheldrake looking at another area of connection, which was people solving crossword puzzles. And he organised with a paper to put in crosswords that circulated as normal, but some people were held back from being able to see the paper, and at a later time, I can't remember how big the gap was, they were given the crossword to solve. Now, the people who looked at the crossword after it had been solved, after it had been published, but they hadn't seen the publication, they found it easier to do the crossword. Now, Sheldrake calls this morphic resonance. If that's a valid name or not is open to debate. But I think somewhere in his experimentation, he has found something that is at the very least with a lot of deep examination. Now, when you go into a different way of thinking, humans have actually excelled at disconnection. I think some of this in Western culture dates back to the idea of categories, and each category separated other things from it. So, you know, insects were separated from spiders. Spiders had 8 legs, insects had to have 6, otherwise they weren't in the same category. We've also become pretty good at doing the same in subjects, education subjects. So the big one, science and the arts, have been separated. But within the sciences, there are many separations. Someone who's an expert in one field might not be an expert in another. We witnessed, Alice and I, witnessed this in a case of when she went to an optometrist because she had eye troubles, and the optometrist said, no, your eyes are fine. And this process of digging around, something was clearly going wrong. Finally, her GP noticed when he did a pulse check that there was some misbehaviour with her carotid artery, which was quite a serious deal. Now, the optician was looking at something a mere few centimetres away from the carotid artery, but did not have the expertise to realise that this was what was causing the trouble. And Alice was sent home and, you know, this will come right in time. Well, no, it wouldn't. So the separation of science in this particular case could have had dire consequences. In the end, thanks to the GP, it got worked out. What I'm saying is the separation comes at a price, makes things much easier to file, but it actually doesn't necessarily help us to survive and live well. So a big thing about this is how we restore, or how we can restore, the balance. And one of my thoughts is to focus on doing things. All the experiments that we've published for projects involve doing things where you start without knowing the answer. When I do them myself, I don't know the answer. I'm just exploring. An important part of it is there's no dogma, there's no sense that this is going to be right or wrong. When I start, I don't know how the outcome is, what the outcome will be. I'm interested in exploring. Now, exploring requires openness, and then it requires quite a measure of judgment, assessment, evaluation, call it what you like. The aspects of responsibility. When we find something out, we have to weigh it up, decide, is this worth pursuing? Is it sustainable? Has it gone off the rails? If it hasn't worked, what do I do next? And we keep asking those questions. And every now and then, once you get started, you find things that really go a long way. The questions lead somewhere. Now, the elements of this really are weighing up the difficulty of persisting, because it does take time, takes concentration, and you've got to stick at it. And in the medium to long term, sometimes even in the quite short term, the goal is to achieve some kind of balance. What creativity is doing is responding to a balance where things have gone wrong. Now, in the processes of nature, things get out of whack all the time. The idea that nature is a nice smooth system which is supremely balanced isn't correct. What happens is there's turbulence and nature evolves to adapt to the turbulence. For the most part, most creatures, like on planet Earth anyway, continue to adapt and survive. In our TLC setting with creativity, our goal also is to adapt and survive. So we're dealing with turbulence, we're learning how it operates, how to move forward. And the one big thing that we're seeking to sidestep are creative approaches which may be very novel and impressive, but which actually make the turbulence greater and they increase the trouble rather than solving a problem. So a suggestion I have to look at these processes in your own life is to just imagine the future and think, now what will happen if I keep doing what I'm already doing? Is that going to lead someplace that you want to be, or is there something moderately wrong, or even could be drastically wrong? Then you think, what changes might I make? And it's often good just, if that's how it comes up, think of one change where you might adjust. And I think being patient is hugely important. You might try something for 3 months maybe, see if it makes a noticeable difference. If nothing's happened, then you go back and review. If you try and do everything at once, your mind probably gets in a fizz and it's impossible to keep going. So step by step, experiment by experiment. When you're doing an art project, rather than a gap of 3 months, the gap might be just minutes or hours or a day or two, so it's slower. One of the things humans do, which is much faster than most creatures in nature, is we can make these decisions quite quickly. We don't evolve over thousands of years to change our biology, although even in that matter, people underestimate it. Our actual intelligence, if you did a test on someone, if you could revive them from thousands upon thousands of years ago, you would find their intelligence is remarkably similar to what it is now. So patience is a big deal. But my suggestion to try this thing with Connexion is to test it initially on yourself and see if you can make a difference. Once you get into connectedness, I think it transforms all the experience we've had elsewhere in life. You begin to see a structure and an approach which takes your creativity forward, and I think it's an awesome contribution to all our lives. Thanks very much.